I'm really not sure what I was expecting to come out of playing this, honestly, but for some reason, it ended up being lower than my expectations. 50 Cent Blood on the Sand is a really bad game, but I guess at least it's actually playable, although even that statement is questionable with how poorly the game runs. Blood on the Sand, because saying 50 Cent Blood on the Sand will get tiring, is one of those games that I question the existence of. For one thing, it's based solely off the popularity of the persona of Curtis James Jackson III, otherwise known as 50 Cent, which I'm pretty sure most of his fans were not clamoring for a cover-based shooter. For another thing, unless you are a really big fan of 50 Cent and his music, I don't see any reason you would want to pick up this confusingly licensed game. And even if you are a fan of his music, problems arise with something I will touch upon in the sound department. Set in an unnamed city in the Middle East, 50 Cent and his rap group named G-Unit have just finished up their latest tour. After finding out that the promoter for the event by the name of Anwar does not have their payment of 10 million US dollars, they prepare to kill him off for not being able to pay them for their show that apparently takes place in the middle of an active war zone. However, Anwar gives 50 Cent a diamond-encrusted skull that used to be the lover of a famous warlord in the area. Before not too long, however, after leaving the concert hall, 50 Cent and his convoys ambushed, his skull stolen, and the only thing on 50's mind is killing off the fool who decided to cross him. The story for Blood on the Sand is a mingled mess of dumb Hollywood blockbuster movies and plenty of middle thousands brown and gray modern war cover shooters, and while it tries to be silly with its setting, it doesn't manage to play off any of the beats quite well at all. In fact, the story is very straightforward, but somehow it's quite easy to lose track of due to how many one-note villains and terrorists get in 50's way. Naturally, over the course of the story, everyone decides to betray you more than just once, and 50 has only himself and his G-Unit partner of choosing to trust. For a 3-hour-long game and story, the narrative feels like it takes a century to get through, as every cutscene is the exact same thing over and over again, and the ending is exactly what you think it would be. There are no real genuine twists or attempts at capturing the player's attention, just a stock generic revenge plot. As far as characters go, I find it amazing that 50 Cent would actually make himself as unlikable as he did here. Curtis, I am not sure how you are in person, but I sure hope you would be a nicer person compared to your in-game counterpart, because as far as video game 50 Cent goes, he comes across as nothing more than a bloodthirsty, money-hungry jerk. Honestly, 50 here was extremely unlikable, threatening to kill literally anyone he came into contact with and calling every woman he met a bitch.
Where's your boss, bitch?
I find it even more humorous that he was actually shocked certain characters he threatened with death betrayed him later on. Like, seriously, what was going to happen after you put a shotgun to their face? The rest of the members of G-Unit are nothing more than background noise and banter. The partner you choose, in this case for me being Tony Yayo, will just shout random nonsense all the time.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about! Blast the fuck out, man! Fire you fucking with me!
Only rarely ever saying anything of substance that I might consider a conversation.
This guy's on the roof over there too, 50!
And no, gameplay-wise, there is no difference between each of the characters. They all act exactly the same way in terms of gameplay. The only difference is which voice clips they spout, so really just choose your favorite rapper, because there is no different gameplay advantage or disadvantage for choosing a different member of G-Unit past the first one you do. The rest of the cast of characters barely got any screen time between them. Anwar really just told 50 his objective until a later twist in the game, and mostly just stood around for 50 to throw insults and threats at. The gun smuggler supplying 50 with his weapons by the name of Raul, along with a strip club owner and massive 50 Cent fan by the name of Eddie, were the two characters I actually didn't hate and thought were okay. Well, okay, they didn't have all that much character, but unlike everyone else in the game, they were tolerable and didn't seem to assault my senses anytime they were on screen. All of the villains just sort of meshed into one, since they are all so one-note and boring. You have the psychopathic mercenary, the security merc who backstabs you, the Russian female double-crossing love interest, and finally the big bad who only shows up for a total of something like 2 minutes at the end of the game. It's even worse since each of the villains' boss battles, outside of one, if I can even call it that, were the same thing every time, that being a recycled helicopter boss battle that you have to fight 4 times over the course of the campaign. In terms of the gameplay, it's a below-average third-person cover shooter where things only work a third of the time when they are supposed to. Don't get me wrong, the game is technically playable and does offer up a bit more variety here here and there than other worse games of this nature, but that isn't saying too much when what you are playing is 50 Cent Blood on the Sand. Outside of two spaced out very linear driving sections and a long on-rails turret section, the gameplay never changes up at all. You run around shooting every terrorist in your path as quickly as you can, all while collecting boring collectibles and smashing open crates of money to buy different looking but extremely similar feeling weapons. While there is a wide variety of weapons you can grind cash for to buy from Raoul's payphones scattered around, outside of some weapons having more ammo, all the weapons feel exactly the same in terms of damage. None of the weapons felt any different when gunning down enemies, so really, you're just buying different weapons for their aesthetic and ammo counts. You can also buy new taunts and melee attacks, but I never found a point for these outside of different voice lines of 50 Cent swearing or a visually different takedown. It was once again, like the weapons, a hollow change-up that offered nothing. A nice thing about the payphones though is that anytime you visit them, they completely restock your ammo, which is nice since sometimes certain environments wouldn't have the ammo I was looking for laying around. Also, speaking of ammo, they came in different colors to match the color of the weapon you had. This was a good idea in theory, but really became obnoxious when I was out of ammo for my machine gun and didn't have any other weapons on me that could take out a target at far range. It just became an unnecessary addition to the game, which it didn't need. Guns surprisingly had a nice weight to them. It's just a shame that enemies felt extremely spongy when being shot at, sometimes taking a whole clip from your weapon just to take them down if you didn't land a lucky headshot. 50 had an ability called Gangsta Fire, which is your standard bullet time gimmick, except here it is eaten up way too quickly whenever used and is almost virtually useless in the game. There was also the melee combat of sorts, which had you pressing the circle button to initiate it, but instead of watching a quick animation play out, you would have to match your button presses to prompts on the screen so you don't screw up your melee attack. If you screw it up, you have to try once again. For once in these type of games, your AI partner was not completely useless here, as whoever you chose will actually take out enemy targets. Not especially well, but I do appreciate that they actually did something other than just stand around. Vehicle sections were sleep-inducing, as they were so straightforward, I felt as though if I closed my eyes, I could still actually beat them. They take absolutely no player input outside of holding down the acceleration key, which is such a shame since I feel as though they could have offered up differing paths with alternate obstacles. The single turret section in the game is incredibly slippery, but thankfully not a hard section to get past outside of it taking forever. It was nice that you didn't really have to aim to hit your targets, as being precise wasn't really all that easy to do. 50 felt both incredibly clunky and floaty to control. Aiming with weapons was way too loose, and weapon spread became obnoxiously impractical when trying to hit targets that were more than 5 feet away from you. For some reason, outside of the melee button for smashing open crates and the odd walled off area here and there to open up a potentially new path, everything is mapped to the same button. Rolling, taking cover, interacting with things, it was all mapped to the X button, so more often than not, you will accidentally take cover in the wrong spot and take a good deal of damage or even die instead of rolling away. Also, when trying to use things, you better be in exactly the spot the game wants you to be and standing as still as you can to get it to actually trigger. Also, on the note of partner obstacles, you will have to wait for the partner NPC to get into position, and this sometimes can take quite a while if they are far enough away from you. The game was really ugly to look at. There was barely any visual change up between the environments, and everything was just a dirt brown color with occasional dark grays or lighter browns popping up, and the character models were quite unappealing to look at, always scowling and making unattractive, angry, or confused faces. Also, the enemies themselves are the same 3 or 4 different colored terrorists. They never really change up outside of maybe 1 or 2 enemies that are supposed to be more elite than the others. I mean, I wasn't expecting there to be a huge enemy variety, but a bit more would have been nice outside the same red, blue, and yellow enemies. Each of the levels all felt the exact same, with very little to no change up outside of maybe the rare alternate path, even though there were all supposed to be different locations. The art direction was just bad and quite lazy, with constant textures being reused. And even though the game looked bad, it somehow ran far worse than you would expect it to. Not only were there constant pop-in problems, but there was near constant stutter and frame loss, with the game becoming near impossible to play due to the frame rate dropping into the teens or even lower. There was also quite a few times in the game where the game would just randomly stop and have to load in bits of the environment that was already loaded in. There wasn't a moment in the game where the frame rate was something I would consider halfway decent. The sound all around was just atrocious, from comically badly read voice lines.
Damn, look at that ice, man.
The same few enemy shouts over and over again, right down to the stock sound effects. Nothing was good in the audio department. Seriously, the alert sound for certain events was just the stock iPhone alert sound. I kid you not. Give it a listen. And I know what you may be asking, and even though I'm not a fan of 50 Cent's music, I can safely say that even if you are, there's absolutely nothing here for you to enjoy. It's the same 3 or 4 songs on constant loop for the entire game with absolutely no variety to them. And you may think I'm joking when I say that, but I am 100% serious. And with all that said, it surprises me that not only is this game still $30 to $50 used, but also the fact that when this originally came out, it was met with pretty darn positive reviews. Thankfully, while the game is terrible, it does have the saving grace of being no longer than 3 hours before it is over and done with. There's absolutely no replay value here on offer, and outside of possibly getting a giggle with a friend over how bad the game is in co-op, I see absolutely no reason to buy or even play 50 Cent Blood on the Sand, even if you are the world's biggest 50 Cent fan. A repetitive, bland, forgettable, and downright near unplayable mess from start to finish, 50 Cent Blood on the Sand is best left behind along with so many other forgotten, generic cover shooters that came out during the same time. It's better if you just watch your favorite Let's Player play this game while you do something else that's better with your time. As always, if you want to help support the channel, please consider sharing the video with a friend or checking out my Patreon linked in the description below. If you have any comments, questions, or recommendations, leave them down below as I read and reply to everything. Until next time, this is Thierry Williamson signing off until the next video. See ya guys!